I've always considered myself a calm person, the type who can overlook small oddities, doesn't make a tragedy out of being 5 minutes late, and doesn't make a scene over forgotten messages. And perhaps that's why I didn't notice anything for so long. Or rather, I didn't want to notice. Every family has its own waves. They rise and fall, and I was convinced that ours was just on the decline. Fatigue, routine, work, her new projects, my business trips. Nothing special. Everything is the same as everyone else's. But sometimes small details start to add up to a too clear picture, and you suddenly realize that what you perceived as normal has long since become a signal. It started quietly. Or maybe I was just blind. First of all, her laughter. It sounds funny, but it was the laughter that was the first bell. It changed. She laughed in a way she hadn't laughed with me in a long time. Quietly, with some inner spark, as if she were listening to something forbidden, something that made her cheeks warm. And every time I asked, "What's up?" she would answer, "Nothing, ma'am," and turn off the screen. I was still smiling then, saying, "Memes are different," and she was waving them off. But I was already starting to feel uneasy, because her laughter didn't sound like a reaction to something funny, but like a reaction to someone's attention. Then her walks began. She had never been very athletic, but in the last month, she had suddenly started going out every day just for a walk. I didn't object. I'm not the kind of man to forbid. But every time she came back, her cheeks were flushed, as if she had either been running or nervous, and her mood was somehow strange, as if she had been carrying some big, sweet secret inside her all the time. But the real suspicion came completely unexpectedly. One evening I got home early. I was let off work because the system was down and we couldn't do anything until morning. I went into the apartment quietly. Not on purpose, I was just exhausted. And I heard her voice. She spoke softly, very softly, but the intonation was not the one I knew. There was a tenderness in her voice that I hadn't heard addressed to me in a long time. I froze in the hallway, not knowing whether to go in right away or listen. I hate myself for staying where I was. But then I felt something was wrong. "No, he's later today." "Yes, I know. No, don't worry." "Me too." I didn't hear the words in full, but I heard the tone. The tone of someone not speaking to a friend, not a colleague, not a brother. It was the same voice she had used to speak to me when we first started dating. Warm, a little shy, excited, in love. I took a step forward and accidentally caught the key on a metal shelf. She fell silent abruptly. Then she went out into the hallway, phone in hand. The smile disappeared from her face as quickly as if it had been erased with an eraser. "Oh, you already?" she said too calmly. "The system went down." I tried to sound casual. "Everyone was let go." She nodded, and I looked at her phone, at how her hand was shaking, at how quickly she locked the screen. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay with my eyes open, listening to her steady breathing, and trying to convince myself that I was exaggerating, that it was just work stuff, that I hadn't heard anything special. But I knew. Someone had come into her life, and I didn't know who yet, but I felt that he had already become to her what I once was. The next day, I tried to act normal. She acted normal too, but too much. Her friendliness was strained, as if she was constantly afraid to give anything away. And when she said she was going to go for a run that evening, I just nodded. But this time I decided not to sit at home and wait for her to return. With another warm smile, I followed her. So simple, without a plan. I let her get ahead of me by 10 minutes, and then I got out and walked the same way. Not stealthily, not hiding behind trees, just walking at a distance enough not to attract attention. And suddenly I realized that her walks were not at all like walks. She walked quickly, focused, as if she were heading to a specific place. The place turned out to be a coffee shop on the other side of our neighborhood, tiny, cozy, with big windows. And when she went inside, I stopped around the corner of the house. My heart was pounding like it was going to burst. I knew I had to go back, that it was wrong to spy, but my legs wouldn't listen to me. I walked closer and looked out the window. She wasn't sitting alone. A man sat in front of her. Not one of our acquaintances, not a colleague, not a neighbor. I only saw him from the side, but that was enough. Tall, in a dark shirt, his hand on the table, his body slightly bent forward, his gaze completely directed at her. And the way she looked at him, I hadn't seen that in her eyes in a very long time. Tenderness, delight, warmth, that soft, feminine tension that cannot be faked. They talked, laughed, leaned closer to each other, and when he touched her hand, she didn't flinch. On the contrary, she moved closer. At that moment, my legs gave out. I stood there, my hand resting on the cold glass, as if it could hold me up. It was a strange feeling, as if I was watching my own life from the outside, like a movie that could no longer be rewound. I didn't know how long I stood there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, maybe an eternity. But when they got up, I hid behind the wall, and I heard her say, "You know I can't do it for long." "I know," he replied, "but I still want to see you." Their voices were quiet, but every word cut into me like a knife. They went their separate ways. She went home, he went the other way. I waited until she was out of sight before I could breathe. When I got home, she was already there, standing in the kitchen drinking water as if she had just really run, red cheeks, trembling hands, slightly labored breathing. Everything seemed real. I thought that at that moment I would break down, make a scene, ask her straight in the eye, but I couldn't. Fear, pain, anger, everything merged into one, but it got stuck somewhere in my throat. She came up and kissed me on the cheek in a familiar, everyday way. "How is your day?" she asked. And I just said, "It's normal." I didn't know then how deep it all went. I didn't know who the man was. I didn't know that this was just the beginning. But I already felt our life would never be the same again. I returned home by the same route I had taken, but I couldn't remember the way. I was shaking. I couldn't feel the cold, the wind, or my own steps. There was only one image in my head, her face, lit by the soft warmth of the cafe, as she laughed, leaned closer to him, as she let him touch her. And I, standing behind the glass, was breathing in short bursts, like a drowning man who hadn't yet realized it. When I opened the door to the apartment, there was silence inside. Such a pure, innocent, homely silence that it made me feel disgusted. It was like it was mocking me. She was standing in the kitchen by the stove, stirring something in a small saucepan. Her shoulders were relaxed, her usual home t-shirt, her hair tied in a ponytail, a slight blush on her cheeks. The same one I had seen an hour ago, only different. "Oh, you already," she said, not even turning around immediately. And at that moment I broke down. Not like a hero in a movie, not beautiful, not restrained. No, I just broke down. "Who were you with?" The voice came out strange, low, hoarse. She turned around abruptly. The spoon fell from her hands and fell onto the stove. What? Don't pretend. I took a step forward. I saw everything. Her face changed instantly. First confusion, then something like fear, and finally defensive aggression. The kind I rarely saw, but I knew. It took her a split second to gather herself into a shell. "What are you talking about?" she said in a voice that was a little too even. "About the coffee shop, about him, about the way you leaned toward him, about the way he touched your hand, about you lying to me. Tell me, who is he?" Silence exploded between us like a blow. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, I saw her vulnerable, not because I was screaming, but because her lies no longer had any space to hide in. You followed me," she whispered. "Yes, and I would do it again." "What, were you spying on me? Watching me?" "I was saving what you had already killed." I felt my head spinning, but I couldn't help it. "Killed me with my silences, my secrets, my memes. Do you think I'm an idiot?" She began to pace the kitchen, taking small, nervous steps, as if trying to escape her own thoughts. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." I slammed my hand on the table so hard that the glass bounced. "Tell me now. Here. In the eye." She stopped. She rested her hands on the edge of the table. Her breathing hitched. "He's just a friend," she finally breathed out. "We worked together. We met, had coffee, talked about a project. That's all." "A friend?" I laughed. Loudly, sharply, almost brokenly. "Darling, I saw the way you looked at him. You haven't looked at me like that in 2 years. Don't make it up! Don't make it up!" I raised my voice. "You text someone for hours, hide your phone, run away from home to get away. And I'm supposed to believe that this is just friendship? Are you serious?" She clenched her fists. She gritted her teeth. "I had the right to meet with the person. Why do I have to report? I'm not in prison." "Are you in prison?" I took a step towards her. "Then who am I? Another idiot who finances your new dresses and waits at home while you laugh with someone else. Don't shout. And how?" I spread my arms. "How should I speak? Quietly? Calmly? Now you want peace?" She took a step back. You've got it all wrong. This isn't a novel." "Then why did you keep quiet when I came home? Why did you laugh the way you used to laugh at me? Why did he touch you? Why did you let him?" She lowered her eyes. I felt the air in the room grow heavier. Everything around us went silent. "I didn't mean for it to come this far," she whispered, barely audible. "I didn't plan anything. But it did." She nodded. That small, barely noticeable nod, it hit harder than any word. I felt a physical blow to my chest. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. My voice was no longer angry, it was empty. "A few weeks." "Did you sleep together?" She pursed her lips. "No. But I wanted to." A pause, a long one. "I don't know." That "I don't know" was more honest than any no. I took a step back. It became difficult for me to stand. There was something in her eyes that resembled regret, but not remorse. And that was the scariest thing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I know," I replied. "From now on, you're either completely honest with me or we're done." She looked at me as if she didn't recognize me. She was silent. Silence was worse than an answer. I took my jacket from the chair. "Where are you going?" She took a step forward. "To breathe, and so that you understand that I will no longer be silent like before." I slammed the door so hard that the hallway shook. This was just the beginning of the storm. I don't know how long we stood like this, facing each other, tired, inflamed, with eyes that hadn't really looked for a long time. She was silent, clutching her glass of water, as if she could crush it with her fingers. I could even hear the glass shaking slightly, and I could feel everything boiling inside, but my legs were already feeling leaden. It was as if all that energy of anger had instantly turned into fatigue. "You're crazy," she repeated, more quietly than before. Not so sharply, but more wearily, almost pleadingly. "You won't even let me explain." "Explain what?" I raised my voice again, even though I didn't want to. "Why don't you answer when I call? Why do you turn off your phone during the day? Why do you delete messages? Why do you come home and pretend like it's normal?" "Because you're suffocating me," she finally snapped. "My every step is under control. My every word is under doubt. Do you even realize that I'm already afraid to write to my friends because you'll tear me apart later?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was proven. Bitter, dry, abnormal. Oh, great. Now it's my fault that someone's looking for you in the middle of the night. It's all because of me, right? She lowered her gaze, and this little thing hurt more than all her words. "He's just a colleague," she whispered. "I told you. A colleague who texts you at 2 in the morning?" I took a step forward. "And you delete his messages. Do you hear yourself?" She didn't answer. And now I knew for sure. Every second of her silence was louder than any words. I walked past her, into the bedroom, and closed the door. I didn't slam it, I just pressed it shut with my palm, as if I were afraid my thoughts would blow it apart. I stood in the dark, staring at our bed, where no one would be sleeping together tonight. And suddenly I realized I didn't even want to go to bed. I was shaking like I'd just run a marathon. A minute later, I heard her walking down the corridor. Her steps were nervous, short. Then the sound of water. Then the rustle of her jacket, as if she was thinking of leaving. Then silence again. "Do you want to talk?" Her voice came from behind the door, but not confidently. More like someone who doesn't know why they're saying it. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. "Okay," she added after a long pause. "As you wish." Her footsteps receded again. Then a light switch clicked. Then the closet door. Then a soft sob, so quiet she thought I wouldn't hear. But I heard it. And for some reason, it only irritated me more, because I couldn't figure out, was she crying because she was guilty? Or because she felt sorry for me? Or because she had finally been exposed? Or maybe because she really thought I had gone crazy? I stood still for a long time, until I suddenly caught a whiff of her perfume, which she always put on before work. Sweet, but for some reason now sharp, almost unpleasant. I inhaled the scent and realized I didn't recognize this person. She had become a stranger to me. 20 minutes passed before I came out. She was sitting on the couch in the semi-darkness, her legs drawn up, wrapped in a blanket. Her face was red, but calm. And that knocked me out more than the scream. "I don't know what you want to hear," she said quietly. "I have nothing to hide." "Then give me the phone," I answered so calmly that I scared myself. I didn't shout, I didn't push, I just said it. She wasn't even surprised. She just glared at me. "No." And that no came too quickly, too confidently. I felt my chest tighten. But I didn't scream. I didn't cause a second wave of scandal. I just sat down opposite, propped my elbows on my knees, and said, "Okay. Okay?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Yes. If you don't give it, then there's something there that can't be shown. She pursed her lips. And then for the first time I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Fear. Small, barely noticeable, but enough to rock my whole world. "You're twisting everything," she whispered. "Just stop." "I'll stop." I stood up. "When I know the truth." But the truth seemed to be escaping both of us. And I felt, this is not even the beginning. I stood there, looking at her, and I felt something inside me break. Not loudly, not abruptly, but like ice cracking under weight. Quietly, but irrevocably. She sat, wrapped in a blanket, looking at me as if she didn't understand what was happening. Or maybe she was pretending not to. Her hands were shaking just a little, but she had set her lips back into a firm line. A familiar, stubborn line, the one that always appeared when she was lying. "You want the truth?" she said. "And I don't even know how to prove it, when you've already decided everything for me." I shook my head. "No," he said calmly. "I didn't decide anything. You did everything yourself." She looked away, and this time it wasn't because she was angry. She was afraid of my eyes. She was afraid of what she would see there. And I didn't hide it. Fatigue, disappointment, suspicion, resentment simply flowed out of me. Everything that had been building up for weeks. "Listen," she began. "No," I interrupted. "I don't want to listen anymore. I'm tired of explanations that don't explain anything." I went to the closet and abruptly pushed open the door. She tensed, stood up a little, as if she wanted to say something, but I didn't let her. "Take your things." She stood still, as if she didn't understand. "What?" "What I heard. Pack your things and leave the house." She finally got up, the blanket sliding to the floor. "Are you serious? Because of your guesses? Because of what you imagined?" I didn't raise my voice. On the contrary, the calmer I spoke, the more nervous she became. "I'm serious," he replied. "If you can't even give me a phone number, if you can't talk honestly, then we can't live together. I won't live with someone I don't trust." "You'll ruin everything with your own hands," she suddenly shouted. "You're making it all up. You're making it up. And now you want to get rid of me, as if I've done something." "Prove you didn't do it," I said quietly. She clenched her jaw. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Then pack your things." She came closer, her breathing hot, chaotic. "You'll regret it," she whispered. "You'll realize one day that you ruined everything because of your own fantasies." I moved away. "I'm already regretting it. Do you know when? When I woke up at night and thought we were a team, but it turned out I was competing with myself." Silence covered us both, the kind that usually appears after a blow. She went into the bedroom. There was a commotion, the sudden movement of the zipper on the suitcase, the clatter of hangers. I didn't go in. I just stood in the living room and looked at the photos of us together on the wall. Smiles, vacations, housewarmings. Every photo now looked like a lie. When she came out, her hands were shaking, but her face was cold. She walked past me without even looking at me. I only noticed a tear glistening on her cheek. The first or the 10th, I don't know. She stopped at the threshold. "Okay," she said. "I'll go. But when the truth comes out, and it always does, you'll remember this moment. And it won't be my fault anymore." I was silent. She closed the door, and only when the apartment became completely quiet did I realize that something inside me had also closed. But I had no idea that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of what would unfold. And what I saw next would change everything I thought. The first 2 days after she left were so empty that even the sounds in the apartment seemed foreign. The refrigerator hummed too loudly, the doors closed too softly, and the silence hung in the air as if it were part of the interior. I walked from room to room like a guest who had accidentally found himself in my own home. I tried to convince myself that I had made the only right choice, that anyone in my place would have done the same. But somewhere deep down, the same phrase kept repeating. She just left, without a fight, without tears, without proof, without trying to fix anything. And that was what ignited something dark inside me. Not pain, not jealousy, but a cold, calculated anger. On the 3rd day, I returned to the office. People were laughing, drinking coffee, discussing deadlines, and no one even knew what was going on inside me. And just then, Megan appeared at my table. She worked in the projects department, smart, active, with that easy confidence that always attracted attention. Blonde hair, sharp eyes, a smile that lasted a little longer than necessary. And she had long shown sympathy for me, not directly, but with those small hints that are hard to brush aside. Today she came almost instantly. "You look different," she said, leaning cautiously toward my monitor. "Are you okay, Alex?" "Yes," I replied, not very convincingly. "Just personal. Do you want to talk? Or at least distract yourself?" Her voice already had the right note. I pretended to think. In fact, I already knew what I was doing. It would be nice to get distracted. At dinner, Megan was too attentive, too soft, too close. She would sit next to me so that our hands would touch, laughing even at what I said without any hint of a joke. I would let her be there, and I would push her. With my gaze, my tone, my casual flirtation, I could see her blossom with every line I spoke, and it gave me a sense of control, something I had been missing so much in recent weeks. That evening I did something on social media so accidentally that Megan was in the background, just for a second, but clearly enough. I knew Sarah would see. Even if we weren't talking, she was watching. She always was. The next day, Megan came to my desk with a smile that said it all without words. "Let's get out of here tonight somehow. Coffee, somewhere to sit. I don't think you'd mind." I looked at her, as if making a decision, even though the decision had been made a long time ago. "Okay, come on." She beamed, as if it was a compliment to her year, and inside I felt something I would never say out loud. Let her now feel what it's like when someone else takes your place. Let him guess. Let him think. Let it burn, just like I burned. But I didn't know then that the game I had conceived would go far beyond innocent revenge. I didn't know yet that Megan was a whole other level of trouble, and that what I do today will come back to me with such force that I will regret every step I take. So far, there was only one thing. I walked next to her in the office corridor, listened to her laughter, and thought I had the situation under control. But in reality, control has already begun to slip away. My romance with Megan didn't start when she asked me out for coffee. It didn't start when we happened to be hanging out at the office after work. It didn't even start when our hands touched for the first time. It began the moment I allowed myself the thought, why not? It was a small, almost innocent thought, but it set everything in motion. That evening we sat in a coffee shop near the office. Megan leaned in a little too close, touched my forearm when she laughed, talked about herself openly, as if she had trusted me for years. And I listened to her, and I found myself not thinking about Sarah for the first time in a long time. "You've become different," she said quietly as we went outside. "In a good way?" I smiled. "In a real way," she replied. And that was enough. Within a week, we started seeing each other every day. Within 2, it was hard not to notice us. I would catch her gaze across the office, and she would smile as if there was a secret between us that made my pulse race. Sometimes she would deliberately lean over my desk so that the whole team could see how close she was. Sometimes she would text me at night, short but explosive. "I can't stop thinking about you. I want to see you again. You're driving me crazy." At first, I thought I was playing a role, that it was just a distraction, just revenge. But something changed every day. I started waiting for her messages, waiting for the moment when she would come in the morning and wish me good morning, with that smile that leaves no choice. Waiting for us to be alone for a minute by the coffee machine, and she would whisper something just for me. One evening, when the office was empty, she came up behind me and touched my neck as if she had done it 100 times. "Alex?" Her voice was quiet but confident. "I think I got more involved than I planned." I turned to her, our faces too close. She looked as if she were waiting for permission. I gave. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was hungry, hot, uncontrolled, the kind that makes you lose your bearings. She pulled me into the conference room, closed the door, and we both forgot that this was an office, that this was work, that this was dangerous. Megan was a wind that blew away everything in its path, and I loved it. I loved the way she looked, the way she touched, the way she wanted me. And every day this passion only grew. We started riding together accidentally, drinking coffee after work, touching just like that. Over the weekend, she wrote, "Come here. I miss you." I didn't hesitate for a second. Her apartment was small, warm, chaotic, lively. It smelled of coffee, vanilla, and something of her own, recognizable. She rushed toward me before I could even take off my jacket, and I felt myself falling. Inside her, into her touch, into her temperament. It was a storm. Hot, senseless, impractical. The kind that destroys a cold mind. After that, everything went even faster. She wrote to me every hour. She was jealous of every woman around her. She always wanted to see me. And I allowed it. Because I was drawn to her in a way I hadn't been for a long time. And revenge has ceased to be the cause. It has become the consequence. But amidst all this passion, I still didn't understand the main thing. Megan wasn't just a romance, not just a distraction. She was someone who wasn't used to letting go of what she wanted, and I was becoming her addiction. And very soon it will come out sideways, for me, for her, and even for what I thought I had already left behind. This was just beginning. One day, we were walking through the city at night, narrow streets, twinkling streetlights, a slight chill in the air, the smell of coffee and pastries wafting from the small shops. Megan walked beside me, leaning slightly against me, holding my hand so that I couldn't let go. Her laughter easily dissipated among the noise of the street, and I found myself thinking that it had been a long time since I felt alive. We laughed, joked, talked about little things, and just when I thought this evening would never end, I saw her. She was walking towards me, the same one, my ex, Sarah. She walked slowly, looking at the windows, but at that moment everything around her stopped. Her heart jumped, her thoughts froze, and her body refused to move. Megan stopped next to me, looking at me in surprise. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I whispered, although I didn't know what I was saying. Sarah recognized me instantly. Her eyes widened, and then she smiled, calmly, but with that subtle hint of surprise and interest. "Alex?" she said, and that voice brought back everything in an instant. "Sarah." I didn't know where to put my hands. "I just—" Megan squeezed my hand tighter. Her gaze became cold but quiet, like the kind of gaze that doesn't need words to convey. "What kind of woman is this?" Sarah came closer. "So you're here alone?" Her smile became a little sly, almost playful. "It seems like one of your new acquaintances is nearby." Megan took a step back, but didn't let go of my hand. I felt her fingers tighten around my palm, and my heart began to pound so loudly that it seemed the whole world could hear it. "We're just walking," I answered calmly. But this calm was taut like a string. Sarah smiled a little wider and nodded. "I see." She took a step to the side, as if trying to leave us alone. But every movement she made emphasized that she was noticing everything that was happening. "Well, I'm glad I didn't interrupt." She moved on, but her gaze continued to catch me, almost pulling me back. I felt the tension between Megan and me rise in an instant. Her eyes, burning like fire, didn't give me the right to relax. "Are you okay?" Megan asked quietly. I nodded, but even I didn't understand what I was really feeling. On one side, an echo of the past, returned for a second. On the other, Megan, now near, her presence, her energy, her touch. And suddenly I realized, now everything has become even more complicated. Because one meeting could turn everything upside down. My romance with Megan, my life, and my controlled revenge. We continued walking, but the air between us became heavy. What had been a passion had now become a game I didn't yet know the rules of. And Sarah? She quietly disappeared around the bend, leaving behind only a shadow and the cold breath of memories that stubbornly caught up with her. Megan and I walked on. The streets were quiet. The street lights cast long shadows. The air was cold, but I didn't feel it. There was only one thought in my head: Sarah. Her image wouldn't leave my mind. Those eyes that looked at me with a slight surprise. Her smile that seemed to turn back time, to moments when everything seemed simpler. Her voice that sounded in my head even after she turned the corner. Megan laughed beside me. Her touch was warm, her gaze trying to find something in common between us. But I couldn't. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't be calm. I couldn't enjoy this moment the way I used to. "Alex?" Megan said quietly, noticing my thoughtfulness. Yeah, I'm fine," I replied, though I didn't know if that was true. The truth was different. I missed. Not Megan, not the passion that was with us, but Sarah. For what once was. For what I thought I had lost forever, and now it turned out that it lives somewhere inside me, quietly and inexorably. I realized that revenge, intrigue, a stormy relationship with Megan, all of this was just a way to drown out the emptiness. But now she was back, even for a second, even by accident. And that was enough to make my heart beat differently, to make me realize that I felt more than I thought. Megan noticed the change in me. Her smile lingered, her gaze more attentive. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," I replied, hiding the feelings I couldn't afford to let out. Just thoughts. But I knew it wasn't true. I thought about Sarah. And the more I thought, the more clearly I realized I miss her. Not the relationship, not the past, but the part of myself that was sincere, alive, without masks or falsehoods with her. Megan didn't know it yet. I wasn't ready to say it either. And it created a new tension between past and present, between passion and sadness, between what I wanted and what I really felt. I looked at her face in the lamplight and suddenly realized, even in the most passionate, stormy romance, there is a place for emptiness. And that emptiness was now called Sarah. It became a quiet but persistent whisper in my head, and I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning I woke up and realized that nothing had changed. Megan sent a message, as always, light and playful. "I missed you this morning," I replied dryly, not because I didn't want to write, but because my thoughts were occupied with something else, Sarah. I sat at the kitchen table holding a cup of coffee and thought about her. About those brief moments on the street when her gaze stopped time. About her smile, which I could not forget. About that fear and that joy at the same time when she came up, recognized me, and again caused a storm of emotions in me. Megan would come sooner or later. She always did. And this time was no different. I felt my heart clench, wanting to laugh with her, to touch her, to be near her. But there was an emptiness that now belonged only to Sarah. I started to doubt myself, my decisions, my whole affair with Megan. It wasn't just a doubt. It was an explosion that shattered all my plans, intrigues, revenges. What I was doing with Megan was a game, a pastime, revenge, but not love. What I felt for Sarah was much stronger than I was willing to admit. I started looking for ways to understand what I really wanted. Should I get Sarah back? Should I stay with Megan, passionately but superficially? Should I just run away from everyone and myself? My mind was spinning around one thing: how to know what was real and what was an illusion. How to determine whether Megan was desire, not love. How to understand whether Sarah was chance or just a memory. And then I decided, I need to act. Not to give in to feelings, not to hide emotions, but to figure out what I feel. Megan was waiting for a message, but I pressed the don't send button, because this time I didn't want to play a role. I picked up the phone and texted Sarah. Just, "Can we meet up?" My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but my mind was finally clear. I knew this would change everything, that any answer or lack thereof would define my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't living for revenge or for control. I was living for hope, that maybe someday the love I lost could come back, that I could be honest and feel again. And Megan? She was waiting nearby, unaware that I had just opened a door to the past. A door that led to something I had been searching for a long time, without even knowing it. We agreed to meet at a small cafe I hadn't visited in a long time. The light from the lamps was warm, but a little dim, as if deliberately emphasizing the tension in the air. I arrived first, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Every little thing seemed huge: the sound of the door, the smell of coffee, the slight breath of air passing between the tables. And then she came in. Sarah. She smiled, a little reserved, a little warm, and that smile melted away my last doubts. "Hello," she said quietly, but I heard more in her voice than words. "Hello," I replied, not knowing where to put my hands. We sat down at the table. The first few minutes were a silence. Not an awkward one, but one that wavered between past and present. I looked at her and realized all the intrigue, everything with Megan, it was just a shadow of what I really felt. "I didn't think you'd call," Sarah said, taking a sip of coffee. "And I didn't think I'd miss you so much," I replied sincerely. Her eyes widened slightly. "Will you miss me?" she asked, her voice carrying that same faint smile I remembered from years ago. I nodded, and suddenly I felt something tremble in my chest. It was a truth that could not be ignored. Not a toy, not revenge, not a game. A real feeling that burst out. We talked for a long time. About the past, about ourselves, about what had happened between us, and what could have been different. And every phrase she said, every look, every touch of her hand across the table made me forget about Megan. Forget about the intrigues. Forget about everything but her. I realized then that this moment was more than a chance meeting. It was an opportunity to fix something that had been broken for a long time. A chance to return to what was real, not a temporary passion. But at the same time, I knew that the world I had created with Megan would not disappear on its own. It was there, waiting, and sooner or later, a choice would have to be made. And I couldn't put it off any longer. I took a deep breath. "Sarah, I don't want to hide anything anymore. I want to be honest. With you." She leaned forward a little, her gaze piercing but calm. "Me too," she whispered. "Although I'm afraid this will change everything." "Yes and no," I said, quietly. "But I can't do it any other way anymore." And then it became clear. From now on, everything is decided not by intrigue, not by revenge, not by distraction. From now on, everything is decided by the heart. And it showed me that my place is next to someone who is truly important. And Megan? She was already behind us, in another world, where our relationship no longer made sense. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of relief. Because now I knew who I was really missing. The next day, I couldn't put it off any longer. Megan was waiting for me as usual in the cafe near the office. Her smile was light, playful, but I could see a hint of surprise in her eyes as I approached. "Hello?" she said, a little confused but trying to keep it light. "Megan, we need to talk," I replied quietly, sitting down opposite her. She leaned closer, her smile still intact, but I could feel the tension slowly building. "Is something wrong?" she asked. I took a deep breath. I can't go on like this. My voice was calm, but each word came out with all its weight. "You meant a lot to me, but that's not what I'm looking for anymore." Megan froze. "What are you—" she began, but couldn't finish. "I met someone else," I said bluntly. "And this is not a game. This is not revenge. This is a truth I cannot ignore." Her face first turned cold, then resentment, which quickly turned into pain. "Are you just playing?" she asked sharply. "You want intrigue again, but this time with me?" "No," I replied calmly. "No games. No intrigue. This is serious. I can't lie to you or to myself." The silence lasted seconds, but it felt like an eternity. "And you think this is easy for me?" Her voice trembled, but she tried to maintain her dignity. I shook my head. "I know. It's not easy for me either. But to leave things as they are would mean continuing to lie to myself. And to you." Megan lowered her head. Her hands were shaking. "You don't care," she said quietly. "You made up your mind a long time ago." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I decided honestly. Now you know the truth." She stood up abruptly, as if to escape from me and her own emotions at the same time. "Okay," she said, not looking at me. "If it's true, if you've already made your choice, I won't stand in your way." She left, leaving me alone at the table. The silence around me was heavy, but I felt relieved. For the first time in a long time, I could think not of intrigue, not of revenge, but of something real. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. "We met. I put everything in order. Now I can be honest with you." My heart was pounding, but this time it wasn't from fear, but from anticipation. From anticipation of a new beginning. Because I finally understood. Sometimes to find happiness, you need to not intrigue, not play, not waste time on temporary passions. Sometimes you just need to be honest. And go after what's really important. And Megan was left behind. A part of the past that helped me understand that no intrigue can replace true feelings. We had arranged to meet in the park where we had spent our first evenings together. The air smelled of autumn, wet earth, leaves rustling underfoot, and a light breeze playing with my hair. Sarah stood by the bench, her eyes watching me, but without prejudice. A calmness I had never seen in her during our past arguments was now on the surface. "Hello," she said softly, almost a whisper as I approached. "Hello," I replied, trying not to let my voice tremble. The silence lasted for minutes, but those minutes were filled with something that words cannot describe. The realization of the past and the fact that we still matter to each other. "I'm glad you came," I said finally. "I want to be honest with you. From the very beginning, from the moment we parted ways." She looked up. Her eyes were shining. "And?" she asked cautiously. And I realized that I still miss you. And I can't ignore it anymore, I admitted. I made mistakes. I was blind. I tried to fill the void and find a replacement. But now I know for sure. You are the one I want by my side. Her lips twitched slightly, and her eyes grew even brighter. "Alex," she said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about us two, and about everything that happened." We sat down on a bench, close but not in a hurry. Every touch of the hand was important, every look like a promise. "Maybe we can try again," she whispered. I smiled, feeling warmth welling up in my chest. "Yes, I want to try, and for real this time." The wind played with her hair, and the park around seemed full of life. We sat next to each other, and not a word was needed to feel that something was beginning anew. Not a game, not an intrigue, not revenge, just real feelings that had conquered the past. And then I realized, sometimes to get back to what's real, you have to make a choice that's scary and difficult, but the only right one. And I made that choice. Sarah took my hand. I held it tighter than I had ever held it before. "Shall we start over?" I asked. "Yes," she said, and there was a sincerity in her voice that I'd been waiting for so long. We sat on the bench for a long time, talking, laughing, and just feeling each other. All the past was left behind. Ahead was a new chance, a new life, and a sincere relationship that no one and nothing could destroy. The first days after that evening in the park were full of new emotions and small discoveries. We talked almost without pauses, laughed, sometimes fell silent, and just looked at each other. But even in these happy moments, a feeling of anxiety did not leave me. Megan would send occasional messages, light, playful, even flirtatious, as if trying to get attention. I read them and felt a mixture of guilt and cold calm. I was drawn to Sarah, and Megan remained only a shadow of the past, a reminder of mistakes, and the line between passion and true feelings. Sarah felt it too. One evening she said quietly, "Alex, I can see that there's something else pulling you back." "It's not what you think," I said. "It's just remnants of the past." But even these remnants were a test for our feelings. The jealousy was quiet, barely noticeable, but it would occasionally seep into conversations, into doubtful pauses, into glances at the phone. We learned to talk about it openly, without accusations, without dramatic scenes. But the tension was always there, as a reminder that relationships need to be built, not just felt. We went to cafes, parks, and movies together. Small rituals, something that had seemed trivial before, now took on new meaning. Every touch, every look, every "how was your day?" became a reminder. We weren't just trying to bring back the past. We were creating something new. But it wasn't without surprises. One day, while walking through the city at night, we met Sarah's colleague. She accidentally noticed that I was walking next to Sarah and asked, "Wow, are you two together?" Sarah blushed slightly, and I felt my heart pounding. The jealousy hadn't subsided at all. It had simply changed form. We laughed, trying not to attach importance to the situation. But it was a little test for us. Can we stay together even in front of strangers' eyes? And with each such moment, we became closer. Jealousies, fears, past grievances, all of these remained, but we learned to communicate openly. And that was the most important thing, trust, which had to be restored step by step, day by day. We both knew that the path would not be easy. We both knew that the mistakes of the past had left their marks. But we also knew this time we would be together not because of passionate intrigues, not because of chance encounters, but because of the sincerity that we were finally able to feel. And sitting on a park bench, holding each other's hands, I thought, sometimes you have to go through chaos, intrigue, and mistakes to understand that true love is worth everything. We sat on the bank of the river, where we had once walked before all the quarrels and mistakes, the water lapping softly, reflecting the lights of the city lights, and the wind playing gently with Sarah's hair. We held hands, and in that moment nothing existed anymore. No Megan, no intrigue, no doubts. "I was afraid," Sarah said quietly, looking into the water. "I was afraid you would leave again." "I was afraid too," I admitted. "I was afraid I wouldn't be able to be honest, that I would make a mistake again." She smiled, and that smile was warmer than any words. "But you didn't leave. You stayed, and we're still here." I pressed her hand to my chest, feeling my heart beat evenly, steadily. "Yes, and this time we'll leave the past behind. No games, no intrigue, just us." She looked up and met mine. "And I'm ready." Her eyes were shining, not with tears, but with the confidence we had finally found together. We hugged, long and sincere, the way those who have gone through a storm embrace and found peace. The past was left behind. Intrigues, jealousy, painful moments, all became lessons that taught us to appreciate each other even more. And then it became clear. Love, tested by time and trials, becomes stronger. What seemed lost forever returned at the right moment, not by chance, but through a conscious choice. We stayed on the shore for a long time, sitting side by side, silent, but feeling each other completely. We felt warmth, peace, and that rare confidence that now everything would be for real. The past shaped us, but it didn't define us. We realized that happiness doesn't just happen. It has to be chosen, cherished, and built together. And this time, we chose it, for each other. The river lapping softly, and the city shining in the distance. We sat holding hands, knowing for sure, now a new, real chapter of our lives begins. Without deception, without intrigue, only love and honesty. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt a complete silence of peace within myself. The silence that no intrigue, passion, or revenge could ever give. Only true love. After that evening on the riverbank, our life with Sarah took on a new rhythm. We no longer hid from our emotions, played roles, or deceived each other. Every day was a small step toward true happiness, a step that required sincerity, patience, and mutual understanding from us. At first, there were little things, but they took on incredible weight. Joint trips to the market, where we laughed, argued, and consulted about every choice of vegetables and fruits. Cooking dinner together, when one made a mistake in the recipe, and the other laughed so much that even the most difficult ingredient seemed funny. Watching old movies that we once loved when we lay on the couch with a blanket and felt that we needed nothing more than each other's presence. These little things strengthened our trust, which we had once lost. They made us stronger because they taught us to listen, notice, and appreciate every minute together. A few years later, our daughter was born, a little ray of light that changed our lives forever. When I held her in my arms for the first time, I felt an incredible responsibility, and at the same time, boundless love. Sarah looked at us with such tenderness that I felt my heart expand with happiness, and at the same time contract with the realization of how precious this life is. Together we learned to care for a new life, to wake up at night when the baby cried, to understand its needs without words. These moments were not always easy, but they gave us a sense of a real home, a real family that we had both been looking for so long. Life never stopped throwing challenges. The baby's nighttime cries, sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and health concerns. All of this tested our tolerance and ability to understand each other. We argued. Sometimes we were exhaustedly silent in front of each other. Sometimes we seriously discussed our fears. And sometimes we just cried together in the dark, without needing words. But every argument ended with a hug and the words, "We're together, and we'll get through it." A few years later, a son was born. 2 little hearts in our home made it full and rich. I saw how the children laughed, argued, rejoiced at the first snow, the first words and steps. We taught them to value sincerity, support, and love. We taught them that true love is not built on intrigue, deception, or manipulation, but on honesty and caring for each other. Despite our happiness, life brought new challenges. Messages from Megan would sometimes make their way to our phones, unexpected meetings, memories that would suddenly surface. Sometimes these little things would cause mild jealousy or insecurity. But we learned to talk about everything openly, without accusations, without dramatic scenes. And with each conversation we became stronger, because now we knew even the past could not destroy what we had chosen together. We built daily rituals together, walks in the park when the children ran ahead, and we held hands and watched their happiness. Evenings when we sat in the kitchen, cooked dinner together and discussed what happened during the day, exchanged thoughts about work, friends, plans for the future. Small joys, looking at old photos, random funny situations, night conversations on the terrace under the stars. All this made our life rich, bright, and full of meaning. Sometimes, looking at Sarah, I felt the same awe that I had felt that first evening on the riverbank. Only now it was strengthened by years of living together, mistakes that became lessons, and daily care for each other. This love was not a momentary passion, but a solid foundation that withstood all the tests, intrigues, jealousy, fears, doubts. Our home became a place of peace, joy, and support. We learned to resolve conflicts calmly, without insults or shouting. We knew that every quarrel was just an opportunity to understand each other better. And even when it seemed that our strength was leaving us, we looked into each other's eyes and felt, we are truly together, and that is enough. We celebrated holidays together, planned trips, built traditions. Our children grew up happy, and we looked at them with pride, knowing that they would grow up in a family where honesty and love were valued above all else. And even when life threw up small difficulties, we always knew we went through chaos, through intrigues and mistakes, and now we have a chance at true happiness. Sometimes I thought back to the past, those storms with Megan, and the moments of uncertainty that once seemed to rule my life. But now I looked at Sarah and the children and realized all of that was left behind as a lesson, a reminder that true happiness is worth the struggle and honesty. We held hands, watched the sunset, and felt complete, calm happiness. The past had no power over us. We chose each other. And now our lives were filled with warmth, joy, and true love, what we had been searching for so long and had finally found. I hesitated for a long time before dialing Megan's number. My heart was pounding. My thoughts were confused. How would she take this? Would she be angry or disappointed or indifferent? But I knew one thing. Leaving everything unsaid, keeping quiet, was wrong. She deserved honesty, my sincere apology, and I couldn't put this step off any longer. We agreed to meet at the same cafe where our romance had begun. I went in first, choosing a table by the window, watching the street, trying to collect my thoughts. When Megan entered, my heart skipped a beat. She was the same as before. Only her eyes, deep, with a mixture of curiosity and slight tension, gave away all her feelings. "Hello," she said, sitting down opposite me. Her voice was calm, but a hint of resentment still slipped through. "Hello," I replied, trying not to let my voice tremble. The silence stretched on for a long time. Every sip of coffee felt heavy, every blink a decisive moment. "I came to apologize," I finally said, looking her straight in the eye. "For everything. For the games, the intrigues, the lies. For hurting you, manipulating your feelings. For using you to get revenge or forget the past." She was silent, holding the cup in both hands, her eyes as if trying to understand the sincerity in my voice. "It's easy for you to say this now," she said quietly. "It's easy because you're already with Sarah." I nodded, not looking away. "Yes," I replied calmly, "and that's true, but it's not that I want to justify myself. It's that you deserve a sincere explanation. You deserve to know the truth, and I've come to tell it myself." She looked up, and I saw the depth of her hurt, her sadness, and even a little surprise. "We were special to me," she said quietly. "I thought we could be something more." I sighed heavily. "We were a moment in each other's lives," I replied, "but I didn't appreciate that moment properly. I had to go through mistakes, intrigues, and losses to understand what was really important. And I don't want you to be left with a feeling of guilt. All of those mistakes were mine." She lowered her eyes, looking away. The silence stretched for minutes. I watched her hands clench around the cup, her lips quiver as if trying to contain her emotions. I knew that sincerity and truth were slow to act, but they had power. "You're sorry, but it won't bring back that time," she said quietly. "It won't bring back anything we could have had." "I know," I nodded. "And I'm not asking you to come back or forgive me right now. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I mean it. And I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here to close this chapter with honor and respect for you." She was silent for a moment, then looked up and met my gaze. "That's honest," she said quietly, but there was a slight released tension in her voice. "Thank you for saying that. It hurts, but it's honest. I felt a relief that I can't put into words. It wasn't about coming back or romantic rekindling. It was about leaving the past behind, without resentment, without hatred, and without unfinished business. I'm sorry, Megan," I added, "and I hope that someday you can forgive me." She nodded, smiled slowly, and said, "Maybe, but the main thing is that you were honest. And that's enough." We spent a few more minutes talking quietly about little things that never mattered, laughing, but without the playful tension of our past. It was the last scene of our past, the end of a story that had once been part of my mistake and my intrigue. As I stepped outside, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time. The past was closed. My heart was free for Sarah and our future together. I realized that true freedom comes not when you leave the past behind, but when you approach it with honesty, admission of mistakes, and sincere apology. Megan stayed in the cafe, and I walked down the street, feeling like I could finally build a life with Sarah without a shadow of guilt or unspoken emotions. It was the last intrigue left behind. I hesitated for a long time before dialing Megan's number. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. My thoughts were confused. What would she say? Would she be angry, disappointed, or indifferent? I had imagined this meeting in my head many times. I stood in the doorway of the cafe, imagining her eyes, her voice, her reaction. And in all the scenarios, I felt a nervous tension that would not let me rest. But I knew one thing. Leaving everything unsaid, remaining silent, would be wrong. She deserved sincerity, my apology, and I could no longer postpone this step. I arrived first and sat at a table by the window. The city lights reflected off the windows, casting a more dramatic shadow on her silhouette. I tried to gather my thoughts, but they were beyond control. Scenes from the past replayed in my head. Our first coffees, our first touches, our first kisses. The memories had been warm, but now they seemed painful, a reminder of how wrong I had been. Megan entered. I noticed her eyes immediately, deep, full of emotion, a mixture of resentment and curiosity. My heart sank immediately. "Hello," she said, sitting down opposite me. Her voice was calm, but there was a faint quiver in her voice that betrayed her excitement. "Hello," I replied, trying to keep my voice even though everything inside was seething. The silence lasted for a minute. I watched her, her hands holding a cup of coffee, her gaze casually gliding over my face, her lips tightening with inner tension. Every second weighed a ton. "I came to apologize," I finally said, trying to convey sincerity in my voice. "For everything. For the games, the intrigues, the lies. For hurting you, manipulating your feelings, for using you for revenge or as a distraction from my own problems." She was silent. Her eyes were fixed on the cup, but I could see my reflection in them, and it reminded me that I was finally making the right move. "It's easy for you to say that now," she said quietly. It's easy because you're already with Sarah. I nodded, not looking away. Yes, I replied. And that's true. But it's not about justifying myself. It's about you getting an explanation. You deserve honesty, and I've come to tell you the truth in person. She looked up. Her eyes were a mixture of emotions: hurt, sadness, surprise. We were special to me, she said quietly. I thought we could be more. I sighed heavily. We were a moment in each other's lives, I replied. But I couldn't appreciate that moment properly. I had to go through mistakes, intrigues, and losses to understand what was truly important. And I don't want you to be left with a feeling of guilt. All of those mistakes were mine. She lowered her eyes, clutching her cup. Silence filled the space between us, but it wasn't empty. It had a heavy sense of the past and uncertainty. I watched as her lips quivered, her eyelids fluttered more rapidly with inner tension. I remember our first nights laughing for no reason, I continued quietly. Our first mistakes, our fights, but also the joy of just being together. Now I see that I ruined it, and I'm sorry more than words can express. She sighed deeply. I'm sorry, but it won't bring back that time, she said quietly. It won't bring back anything we could have had. I know, I nodded. And I'm not asking you to come back or forgive me right now. I just wanted you to know the truth, so that I could admit my mistakes, so that we could both close this chapter with dignity and without resentment. She looked up, met my gaze. Her gaze was penetrating, but without the anger that had once accompanied our arguments. That's honest, she said quietly. It's painful, but honest. Thank you for saying that. I felt a huge relief that I couldn't put into words. It wasn't about going back or romantically rekindling it. It was about closing the door on the past without resentment or hatred, without emotions left unsaid. I'm sorry, Megan, I added. And I hope that someday you can forgive me. She nodded, smiled slowly, and I felt the tension between us gradually dissipate. Maybe, but the main thing is that you were honest. And that's enough, she said. We spent a few more minutes talking quietly about the little things that had once mattered. We laughed, but it was a different kind of laughter. No frivolous tension, no intrigue, just people finally closing a chapter in their past. It was the final scene of our romance, the final conclusion to the intrigue, and the moment when I could fully feel myself moving on toward Sarah and our life together. As I stepped outside, the fresh night air hit my face. I felt an incredible lightness that I hadn't felt in a long time. The past was closed. My heart was free for Sarah and our future together. I realized true freedom doesn't come when you leave the past behind, but when you approach it with sincerity, admit your mistakes, and ask for forgiveness. Megan stayed in the cafe, and I walked along the quiet street, looking at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. Inside, I felt that I could finally build a life with Sarah, without a shadow of guilt, without any remnants of intrigue, and with absolute confidence in my choice. This was the last intrigue, the last unclosed page, and now the past was behind us, and the future belonged only to us.